Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show, in association with DavidIke.com.
At around about 5 p.m. London time, I spoke with Michael Shrimpton, the barrister and the author of Spy Hunter. This was his take on what he knew at that particular point today, and this is fascinating. Listen carefully.
The incident was allowed to happen. That is because security at the Palace of Westminster is in the hands of the Metropolitan Police. They are penetrated. They also report to the Cabinet Office. The Cabinet Office, we know, were very upset by the passage of the Brexit bill. I suspect that somebody in the Cabinet Office wanted to retaliate against Parliament. I imagine the intent was to have another assassination of an MP. We know that Joe Cox MP was assassinated last year by Germany's GO2, who put up a nutter. There's always a known nutter that disguises the intelligence involvement behind him. We know that Joe Cox was assassinated on the orders of German intelligence by GO2, the German operation in London, in order to try in a desperate last-minute attempt to swing the Brexit referendum Germany's way. The Germans are very alarmed at the thought of Britain leaving the EU. We know that the Germans are monitoring the polls. We know that the Germans concluded that the Brexit side were going to win, the British side were going to win the referendum and beat the German side, the British side being the Leave side, the German side being the Remainers, mostly led by German assets, or pro-German, members of the pro-German element. And we know that Joe Cox was murdered in a desperate attempt and a pathetic attempt to blame the Leave campaign. The polls switched a little bit back to Leave. Her murder may have gained 1 or 2 points for the Remain side, but at the end of the day, her life was, she was assassinated in vain by the Germans.
Now, can I say this? Can I jump in there? So do you think that one of the ways this will be played, this is going to be played a week before May was due to trigger Article 50, the 29th of March. Some people are going to play this as shared intelligence is vital, and when we share intelligence with our European partners, we can better prevent incidents like this. Do you think then that it is no coincidence that this happened today on the anniversary of the Belgian attacks and a week before the triggering of Article 50?
I agree. It's not a coincidence at all. The Germans pay particular attention to anniversaries. It's no surprise at all that it should be on the anniversary of the German-sponsored attack in Belgium, and no surprise at all that it should come a week before Brexit. So, yes, I think the timing is highly significant. I think it's a German retaliation against the House of Commons and the House of Lords for passing the Brexit bill, and it may be an attempt to intimidate Theresa May into not serving the Article 50 notice. The Germans are in a panic because they know there isn't going to be a deal. The politics of the situation is such that once Britain serves the Article 50 notice, the United Kingdom will leave without a deal. And I imagine the Republic of Ireland will have to come out with us because you export so much to Britain. And, of course, so many Irish people depend on the British labour market. And that market will be shut.
The UK's biggest export market is the Republic of Ireland, of course. I'm not sure I entirely agree with that. I'd love nothing more than the Republic of Ireland to leave the European Union, but I don't know how far off that is. So, Michael, how does something, and you detailed this sort of, or events like this, and the collaboration between British security personnel and security personnel in Europe and Germany. How does something like this happen then? So the attacker is genuine. In your opinion, it is an Islamic fundamentalist who wants to get in and do some damage. Maybe he's gotten into the country through. I don't want to say this because we'll be accused of racism and everything else, but maybe he's come in to the country through France, maybe he is radicalized. So he's genuine. He's genuine, right?
Yes, we don't. At the moment, we don't know if he's an Islamist or not. This is very early, and in fact, I wasn't watching the TV news. I was alerted to it by funnily enough, I was alerted to it by an email from the Washington Post because I was working. I do have a day job. I was working on a multi-million-pound commercial case as part of my day job, and only picked this up in the last hour or so in response to an email from just a circular email from the WAPO. We don't yet know if it's an Islamic. It sounds Islamic, but it's a bit early to say. But that would make sense. We know that Islamic terrorism is sponsored by the DVD. We know that Al-Qaeda and ISIS are effectively under DVD control.
Well, and Mossad, and of course GCHQ and the CIA. Let's be honest about that.
Well, no, not GCHQ possibly. They're not. Mossad are not under DVD control, but they are.
No, of course not. But Mossad have their dirty fingerprints all over ISIS. Let's be honest about it. You know, well, and this is the crux of it, Michael, isn't it?
Yes, I'm doubtful about that. I think some some DVD assets inside Mossad may be involved in sponsoring ISIS, but ISIS is not an Israeli intelligence creation. It's a creation of the DVD. Remember, all Islamic terror groups can be traced back directly or indirectly to the Muslim Brotherhood, which was set up by the German spy Sani al-Banna in 1928. So Islamic terrorism is a German thing. Terrorism is a German thing.
Well, it's a Saudi thing, isn't it? The Wahhabi style of Islam really comes from, well, these days it's home, of course, to Saudi Arabia. We could talk all day about that, yeah.
But where do the Saudis make their money? The Saudis make their money in offshore high-yield trading programs run from Germany. So the Saudis are close to Germany. Saudi Arabia is almost
the House of Rothschild. I'm not going to argue with you about this again. You and I have been arguing for years.
Well,
it's the Frankfurt Rothschilds, right? Yeah. Hey, listen.
Exactly. They're German. Yes,
of course, the Frankfurt Rothschilds. We've only got a couple of minutes left, and thanks for breaking off to do this today. What's likely to be the outcome of this? So we have deaths. It's terrible. I don't want to sound insincere. I mean it. It's dreadful. People are dead. People are injured. Yeah. What are likely to be the ramifications of this? You said to me in a message you sent me earlier on, obviously a beefing up of security. Are we looking at security in Parliament? Are we going to see, Michael, that awful spectre that we see in France now in Paris? Are we going to see the call for a type of martial law with the British Army presence being, rolled out onto the streets of London?
No, I predict that nothing will happen. MPs are intelligence illiterate. That applies not least to the Intelligence and Security Committee. Indeed, if MPs were intelligence illiterate, the last committee they'd be appointed to is the Intelligence and Security Committee. Since the Intelligence and Security Committee are intelligence illiterate and don't know what they're doing, and since no member of the House of Commons is aware of GO2, I mean, this is an agency that's going around assassinating MPs, and MPs are simply blind to its existence. They don't know what they're doing. You must bear in mind that there are no MPs of high intelligence. The last member of the House of Commons with high intelligence was Enoch Powell, a very nice man, and Enoch and I got on very well together. Enoch, of course, sadly died a few years ago and hasn't been in the House of Commons for many years. He was almost the only MP of high intelligence in the post-war era, a former brilliant intelligence officer, of course, reached the rank of brigadier in World War II. Once Enoch went, that was the end of any intelligence in the House, real intelligence. I mean, obviously, they're not stupid. Even the Green Party MPs are not completely stupid. Even the Lib Dems are not completely stupid, but they're not terribly bright. An IQ of 140 marks you out as intelligent in the House of Commons.
Listen, I could argue with you on that, but we don't have time, so I'm not going to be.
The MPs aren't bright enough to work it out, and they're too egotistical to listen to people who do know what they're talking about. So my prediction is that nothing will happen.
Michael, I'm not sure. I can't agree with you that they're not going to propose more and more draconian measures, more and more surveillance, more and more interference in what people are doing online. I think this is coming down the line. But what you're saying is, and we talk about it on this program. In fact, we get accused of being, idiot progressives, but we're not, you see, because we understand things are not black and white. Yes, the deliberate destabilization of Syria and the deliberate migrant flow, deliberately organised and engineered, obviously amongst those migrants, most of whom, of course, are, desperately sad people driven out of their country by ISIS and by the tyranny there. So out they come into Europe. Obviously, amongst those migrants are lunatic jihadists, Michael. I'm going to ask you this. Is that a deliberate ploy by these very same agencies you talked about there to destabilise Europe, destabilise the UK, and push for greater unity in Europe?
Yes, a known DVD agent has been linked to funding boats who are bringing some of these illegal immigrants into Europe. And I have to say I respectfully reject the analysis that the majority of genuine refugees, only a minority of genuine refugees, many come from West Africa and states where there is no real crisis. They're economic refugees. They may not be very nice states, that's because they're badly run. But they're certainly not fleeing persecution. And even those who have fled Syria have normally found refuge in a safe third country like Turkey. So they're not actually fleeing Syria. They're moving from Turkey to more prosperous states in the West. The motive for moving into the European Union is financial, not safety. But I don't think anything will happen. There'll obviously be a tightening up of security. The queues will be longer to get into the House of Commons over the next few days. Since I'm not visiting the House of Commons in the next few days, I'm not going to be affected.
Yeah.
The police will put on a little bit of a show, so there'll be some surface changes, but they'll only last a week or two. In a couple of weeks, it'll all be back to normal. The dead will be buried. People have forgotten about today's shocking incident. It's sad to say it, but not enough lives have been lost in order to get MPs to think. If 100 people have died, possibly, although even then I doubt it, possibly MPs might sit down and try and analyse terrorism and try and analyse how it is that terrorists are given access to the Palace of Westminster.
Well, it's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing. Just to finish on this note, it's always an amazing thing for me to hear from a guy like you, a guy who's worked as a barrister, who's been involved in incredibly high-profile cases, who's written a best-selling book, for you to basically come on shows like this and say, these things are allowed to happen. So I'm going to finish with this. You said that the death toll is not, and we don't know, it might rise, and I hope it doesn't, but it might rise over the course of the afternoon. And I know you hope it doesn't. Yeah. Should we then be on the lookout for, within the next couple of days, who's to say that something else like this is not planned for Manchester, for Birmingham? People need to be on high alert for the next couple of days, right?
Yes, I think the terror threat level could be raised. It'll be temporarily raised, possibly in relation to this incident. I was on the phone to Downing Street on another matter earlier. It's clear they're fairly busy there. In fact, I'd run Downing Street, not fully aware of what had been going on in the Palace of Westminster. And I'm sure the Cobra Committee has been convened. They will be looking at increasing the terror threat level. It's not going to make a lot of difference whether they put it up a notch or not. The problem is that MPs and peers do not understand terrorism. The problem is that GO2, operating out of Vauxhall Cross, have effective control of the Met and have assets inside the Cabinet Office. Inquiries are a total waste of time. There's bound to be an inquiry. It's bound to be a complete waste of time. There won't be a proper coroner's inquest. They'll probably bring in a tame judge, and they'll bring in a tame judge to do another Janet and John inquiry. The judge, to their point, won't be very bright, or if he or she is very bright, they'll be compromised.
So basically, sorry, Michael, to finish, basically, MPs are not aware of the fact that those charged with protecting them and their constituents are basically in on it. They're basically turning a blind eye and letting it happen.
I'm afraid so, yes. The MPs have just stood back and watched while the Metropolitan Police have let an attacker into the Palace of Westminster in the same way that the Met let a man intending to assassinate Her Majesty into Buckingham Palace. That was allowed and permitted by the Metropolitan Police. The same has happened today. We learned nothing from the attempt to assassinate the attempted regicide of Queen Elizabeth II back in the 1980s when David Waddington was Home Secretary. And we won't, I think, learn anything from today's incident, sad though it is.
Michael, thanks for taking the time out to speak to me. I appreciate that. It's an ongoing thing, and it's good of you to do it when you haven't had a real chance to have a proper and thorough look at what's going on. Good to hear from you, and I look forward to speaking again soon.
Thank you.
Michael Shrimpton speaking with me around about 5 p.m. London time today. Things were really ongoing at that time. It happened just before 3. Now, Michael clearly states there that this, in his opinion, is allowed to happen. There are a couple of reasons for it. Basically, because the Article 50 triggering process is nigh. We're talking a week away. We're talking exactly a week away. It's a week today that process is due to happen. He said that, did Michael. And he made reference earlier on to his belief, and he said this on the programme before, that Joe Cox was murdered. I pointed out again, I think Michael plays games when he talks about the Germans. He means the Frankfurt Rothschilds. He's not prepared to say Rothschilds for whatever reason. That's his opinion. Now, a number of you have been tweeting today and asking a question, and to be fair to you, you've been asking it in about as sensitive a way as you can ask it, because it's not easy to ask it. And that is, why are these guys so incompetent? Why are these guys taking massive risks for not guaranteed high rewards? Do you understand what I'm saying? Why are these guys, now you were saying this to me on Twitter, why are these guys driving cars onto footpaths and jumping out of them with a knife? It's not the most deadly, it's not the, well, it is deadly when people die, when people are knocked down, but it isn't the most competent way of causing mass casualties, the sorts of numbers that you would imagine these people would want to kill and maim and injure. And I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. I don't. A number of you talk about things like false flag and staged event and drill. I don't buy that. I think from what we've seen today, I think a guy definitely drove a car into or onto Westminster Bridge, definitely tried to hit people down and knock people down with it, and then jumped out with a knife. How we got to be there, who knew about it in advance, I have no idea. As I'm speaking with you now, we haven't yet heard what we often hear. We often hear that he was known to the police, he was on a terror watch list. I don't believe that we've been given that information, at least not since I came on air at 7 p.m. GMT.